For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to StratNews Global. I'm Nitin Gokhale and you are on our evening program, The Gist. And joining me on The Gist this evening is India's High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, Gopal Baglay, who is going to take us through where the India-Sri Lanka relations are at the moment and what can we look forward to going forward as the two countries determine their relationship for the future. Welcome to this program, High Commissioner, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Nitin, and good evening to your viewers. Thank you very much for inviting me to GIST.
No, it's our pleasure, and thank you very much for joining us from Colombo. So let me start with the obvious question. Exactly 2 months after President Ranil Wickremesinghe had come to New Delhi, and there was a series of agreements and also, of course, in-depth talks between the leadership of India and the President of Sri Lanka. So where are we from that time, and what are the three main focus areas that you have determined for this relationship?
Thank you very much, Nitin. I think that's the most important question, especially in the context of the visit of the President of Sri Lanka, Ranil Wickremesinghe, to India, which was his first as the President of this country. I think that the visit put the focus squarely on the consolidation of economic partnership. And you would know, and your viewers would also know, but please bear with me if I repeat what had happened in the preceding 3 years. First, during COVID, the vaccine Maitri program brought the Covishield vaccines to Sri Lanka, and that started Sri Lanka, that enabled Sri Lanka to start its vaccination program ahead of the time. That was even as we were undergoing one of the worst COVID waves in India. Then I think thereafter the economic crisis as a result of various factors, including the impact of COVID, unfolded very severely last year. And your viewers would know, obviously, that the assistance from India was very substantive and it was rendered with great speed. Total about $4 billion. I will not go into those details because that would already be with your viewers. But essentially, there was currency support, there was lines of credit for food, fuel, essential medicines, and also industrial raw products that kept the livelihood and the life of the people going and proved to be the lifeline. And there is great appreciation for that in Sri Lanka. Now, in this backdrop, the visit took place exactly 1 year after Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe had taken the office of the president. In that 1 year, there had been a bit of economic stabilization, and Sri Lanka was preparing for economic recovery and subsequently later to come in future economic growth. So as a close friend and partner of Sri Lanka, I think what India offered was its continued support for democracy, economic stability and growth in Sri Lanka, and also our partnership for bringing in more investment in the areas of Sri Lanka's requirements. So if I could say three broad areas, I would say that investment promotion and developing connectivity and promoting trade. Now, you would also know perhaps that in the last week or so, the trade negotiators, the chief trade negotiators of the two countries have held a virtual meeting, and the discussions which had been stalled over ETCA, the Economic and Technological Cooperation Agreement, have begun. And the two negotiators have now a timeline where they will conduct more elaborate and maybe even physical meetings to discuss individual chapters. So this particular visit, I would say, has focused on consolidating the economic partnership of the two countries, leveraging geography and leveraging the fast economic growth of India. And I would also say that India is seen in this country as an opportunity, as a dependable partner, and there is great enthusiasm cutting across political spectrum, cutting across various walks of life, whether corporate or common people, to uh, to build a stronger relationship with India, to build a very strong economic partnership with India.
Well, that's very well summed up, actually, Commissioner, the entire background and where we are today. You spoke about connectivity. Let's look at the two components of connectivity. One is, of course, the physical connectivity or transport connectivity, and the other that has been envisaged is the energy corridor or energy connectivity or energy exchange between the two countries in many ways. If you can elaborate on these 2 points a little bit, where are we looking at? What are we looking at, and what is the plan for the next, say, year and a half?
So connectivity is an enabler of closer relations, and the relations also benefit from more connectivity, and in turn, uh, stronger and closer relationships require more connectivity and actually lead to greater connectivity. So this is a sort of a mutually reinforcing chain. In the immediate context, you would have seen that last year, Chennai Jaffna flights have been restored. And now, since December last year, they have been going on. There were 4 flights per week. There are now 7 flights per week. Every day there is 1 flight from Chennai to Jaffna and back. And I am told that they are doing very well. Perhaps there is a waiting list of a month or more. Very shortly, and your viewers will be very happy to know that we are going to resume the ferry connectivity between Kakesanthurai in Jaffna with India. The port identified is Nagapattinam for now, and we expect that for some time we will be able to run this ferry service within the next month itself. There, of course, the post-COVID situation led to the resumption of the normal civil aviation traffic. Now, many cities of India are very well connected, which is very good for our own people and tourists to come to Sri Lanka. As you know, Indian tourists continue to be the largest number of tourists from any foreign destination coming to Sri Lanka, but also for Sri Lankan pilgrims and other people to go to India for various purposes. But these are all the immediate term, short-term connectivity advantages and what is happening. Our focus is on enhancing connectivity for the long term. And there, I would point out 3 specific initiatives which are contained in the vision document issued after the discussions between the 2 leaders, Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi and President Ranil Wickremesinghe. That vision document itself focuses on catalyzing connectivity for prosperity. The 3 areas that I would like to flag are constructing a power grid interconnection between India and Sri Lanka. Now, in the short term, it may benefit Sri Lanka by import of cheaper power, as it has happened in the case of India's other neighbors. But in the long term, and given the enormous potential of Sri Lanka in terms of their offshore wind energy and solar energy, just few days ago, I think 2 weeks ago, World Bank has released a study which puts the offshore wind potential in Sri Lanka at 56 gigawatt, 56,000 megawatt. And obviously, India is the nearest market for that. There can be various means of evacuation. People are also talking about green hydrogen, etc. But certainly, power grid cable connection, whether undersea or overhead, is the first option that has been discussed. We are very close to reaching technical understanding, a broad agreement on technical parameters between the 2 sides. And after that, the 2 sides will carry out discussions on financial models and commercial viability. But as I said, the huge potential itself is a very good sign of connecting, just like hydropower from Bhutan or Nepal, and also now Bangladesh also being connected. So it will, I think, a connectivity to India in terms of power grid interconnection will also give Sri Lanka access to BBIN countries in future. And that's a very important thing, because it will have not only access to India, but to the regional grid, which is effectively there. The second aspect in terms of energy security of Sri Lanka is the multi-product oil pipeline from India's east coast to Sri Lanka. Now, this is very important because we saw that last year's economic crisis and its consequences had a major aspect of which was related to shortage of energy sources, whether power or fuel. Uh, Sri Lanka's, we are in touch with Sri Lanka. The decision has been taken by the two leaders to initiate a feasibility study. After that, number of steps have been taken, and we are in close touch. Both sides have set up a joint committee representing the senior levels or at the technical and official level, and the two sides will now conduct the feasibility study for this oil pipeline. But I would say that the real game changer for the future will be the use of Trincomalee as an energy hub and transport hub. And on that also, there was an MOU signed between India and Sri Lanka to jointly develop Trincomalee as energy transport hub and also an industrial zone. The third most important component which came out of the vision document is the connectivity corridor, or what is commonly known as the land bridge between India and Sri Lanka. Now, as Nitin, you would know, this is not a new idea.
Yes.
But what is new is the context. There is very strong people-to-people relationship. There is a very strong economic logic, the logic for economic connect, and the logic for geographical proximity and leveraging geographical proximity. So the connectivity corridor between India and Sri Lanka will not only benefit regionally, the people of those areas which will get connected, but also it will provide a depth to both the economies and will lead to greater prosperity. What is even more important is that you would have seen the initiatives such as Global Biofuel Alliance, which Sri Lanka has joined, and also the other initiative which came out of G20 is IMEC. Now, India, Middle East, Europe corridor. Imagine the benefits to our neighbors, whether to our north or to our east, and other friendly neighbors also who wish to join this. I can't even begin to imagine the benefits which can come to them from IMEC. So I would say that connectivity corridor and materializing this connectivity corridor between India and Sri Lanka is a very good portent for future. I think it will enable Sri Lanka to look west and act best.
That's true. In fact, you also spoke about the investment proposals, or the likelihood of investment and trade from India, or investments from India into Sri Lanka to further enhance the effectiveness of its economy, or further boost its economy. Are the areas already identified, or you are in the process of identifying those areas? Because there's also this other thing about the digital public infrastructure that India has offered to, use of those tools to Sri Lanka. So where are we on those two fronts?
On the investment side, the priority sectors for Sri Lanka, and where the Indian investment already exists and is making progress, are ports, renewable energy, automobiles, and tourism, hospitality, medical sector. So these are the sectors in which we have seen long presence of Indian companies or fresh entries which are making good progress. And we will continue to encourage investment in these areas. As you know, the West Container Terminal, or the CWIT as it is called, is progressing. The construction, I'm told, is proceeding according to schedule. The renewable energy project, both from private sector and public sector, have made progress. Our public sector NTPC will develop a solar power plant in Sampur, and is close to negotiating an RFP and a PPA with their Sri Lankan counterparts. And similarly, I think the most important, in the future will be the digital technologies. So last year, a decision had been taken by the authorities in both the countries to allow the use of Indian rupees for trade transactions. That has been going on. It is slowly picking up. We need to create more awareness. But when we combine digital transactions with it, then that will be the real game changer in this area. Now, I'm happy to tell you that the agreement which had been reached between the international digital payment authorities of both the countries during the visit of the President of Sri Lanka. Now, under that, we expect to have the first digital transactions begin very shortly, perhaps as early as next month. And that will also bring even more Indian tourists to Sri Lanka. On the DPI, the one major project which the government of India is assisting Sri Lanka with is the Unique Digital Identity Project. It is a project undertaken by Sri Lanka. It will be a Sri Lankan project, but supported by the government of India. The bidder selected by or the vendor selected by the Sri Lankan government will carry out the project. It will be an Indian vendor. And once that backbone is available, then any number of services can ride on it. From our own experience, we have seen that this digital revolution augurs very well both for entrepreneurship and also governance. So these are areas in which we are very happy to share our experience, both in terms of governance as well as the corporate segment.
Oh, well, yes. In fact, lots of positives there and lots of hope for the future from both sides. Especially Sri Lanka will benefit from what India can offer in terms of investment, in terms of infrastructure, and also digital technology, as you mentioned. Let me come to the more difficult parts of the relationship, which are long-standing and also, something that you have to keep a close watch on. One is, of course, the constant demand from the Chinese friends to send their survey and scientific ships, as they call it, to Sri Lanka's different ports, and India's concerns over it. There are contradictory reports over the past week or so that they have allowed one ship to come, one more is coming in January. And yesterday, again, there was some confusion whether the ship has been denied permission. So what's your take and how are you dealing with it? How are you tackling? What are you telling the Sri Lankan government about India's concerns?
So I would put it like this. Let me deal with this in two parts. One,
Right.
what you flagged, the ships, etc. Certainly, I mean, if you really look at it objectively, there is perhaps now, as compared to the recent past, maybe last 1 or 2 years, there are more such visits or possibilities of such visits that we see now. And that is not really surprising because you would know, Nitin, you observe the entire world for strategic matters. I think it's also a function of enhanced naval activity by China in the Indian Ocean region as such. So,
Sure.
but here what we see is that there are obviously, we have to ask the question how these visits are related to the requirements of Sri Lanka, or what is their contribution to enhancing the security of the region as such. Now, we have had conversations, and I said, I mean, I'm not going into specifics here, but I would say generally our concerns are well known to the government of Sri Lanka, and Sri Lankan leadership has been very categorical that the territory of Sri Lanka will not be allowed to be used for any harm to come to India. And so that is one aspect of it. The second aspect is what we are doing as bilateral partner of Sri Lanka and with other like-minded countries to enhance the capabilities of Sri Lanka itself, both for defense and maritime security. You understand the importance of Sri Lanka as maritime nation, as an important Indian Ocean region island country, our closest maritime neighbor and friend. In fact, Sri Lanka will be the IORA chair next month when it will take over from Bangladesh. The IORA ministerial is scheduled around 11th of October. So there are a lot of things and vectors of cooperation which are ongoing in the maritime domain, in the defense domain, in the HEDR domain also. Look, whenever there is a difficulty in Sri Lanka, or whether it's a fire on a ship which is in Sri Lankan waters or close to it, or whether there are floods or medical emergencies, or even requirement of fertilizers, it's the Indian Navy or the Indian Air Force which are pressed into action. So the advantage of India being a first responder are available to Sri Lanka as our closest friend and maritime neighbor. So our effort is to enhance Sri Lanka's own capacities, to build Sri Lanka's own capacity, and let it grow, let those capacities grow and enable Sri Lanka to contribute in a larger scale, not only to its own security, but also the region's security as a whole.
I think that sums up the relationship very well, because the defense and military cooperation is actually very deep as far as India and Sri Lanka are concerned. So that's very well put. Let me also turn to, and my last question in this interview is the fishermen's issue, which is tricky, which is long-standing, and which is more than an irritant between India and Sri Lanka, and it has regional dimensions in India. So, where are we on that? Is there any way forward that you will look at? Is there something that you've arrived at, or we are still sort of battling the various dimensions of it and not able to come to a conclusion?
See, the first and the most important aspect, and I'm speaking here from the High Commission's point of view, is to make sure that our fishermen that come to it happen to be, apprehended by the Sri Lankan authorities are safe. So that's our first priority, and we remain deeply engaged with the government of Sri Lanka, also in touch with the relevant authorities on the Indian side, be it Coast Guard or be it other authorities in states or union territories. And I'm happy to tell you that we remain engaged very closely on one side with the Sri Lankan authorities to ensure that the fishermen are treated in a humanitarian way, and on the other side we also remain at the High Commission closely engaged with the authorities on the Indian side, be it Coast Guard or the states or the union territories. And but there were some incidents which caused concern about a couple of years ago or so in 2021. But since then, I think the emphasis has been that there should be a humanitarian approach. It's a livelihood matter. So our effort is to resolve it, to address it in that manner. Again, two aspects are important. One is that the Indian fishermen do enjoy, under the agreements that exist, certain traditional rights, and those are also, they should continue to be enjoyed. And for example, on Kachativu, there is also an annual festival in April, St. Anthony's Feast, for which the Sri Lankan and Indian fishermen also come. So there are areas in all these metrics where both sides, the fishermen for both sides, come together and cooperate. They also have a fishermen association from both sides to discuss these issues. This is apart from the government mechanism, which is the joint working group, meets quite regularly. What we are trying to do is to see what can be the way forward in terms of management. And there are certain suggestions from the government of Sri Lanka, certain ideas from the government of Sri Lanka. For example, joint management. Now, joint management is not a question of a structure. It's a question of how do you do the joint management, and what do you do in that. So we have requested our Sri Lankan friends and colleagues for more details in that regard. The other idea is, of course, to build capacity again in Sri Lanka for the fishing communities, address the difficulties that they face in the daily matters like fishing nets or repair of boats, or even fishing industries like aquaculture or cultivation of various other species in Sri Lanka. I am happy to tell you that there has been good engagement with the cooperation of government of Sri Lanka in these areas. Certain Indian institutions have visited Sri Lanka. Certain Indian investors are also coming here. And I think this engagement, what we need to do is enlarge the metrics of the cooperation and engagement in the fisheries sphere, which looks beyond the fishermen matter, while we try to address that as best as we can.
I think on that positive note, I must end this conversation here. But thank you very much for your detailed explanation of the robust relationship between India and Sri Lanka, and of course, the good job that you have done in these 3.5 years that you've been there during the most difficult times that Sri Lanka has faced. I'm sure it was challenging for you as well. But as you look forward to your next assignment, at least one can look back and say, oh, job well done. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your kind words, Nitin. Thank you very much.
So that was Gopal Baglay, India's High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, who has been there for 3.5 years and will be moving on to Australia, perhaps at the beginning of the next year, and will be taking up his new assignment there. But clearly, there's much to be done in the relationship between India and Sri Lanka. Much has been done, but several areas of much further enhanced cooperation between the two countries are likely to be taking place in the near future. That's all we have this week on this edition, actually, of The Gist. Do keep watching StratNews Global. You know where to reach us. Your feedback is extremely important for us. And you know that our social media handles are visible on the screen. So do keep subscribing to them or sending your comments on that. For the time being, it's goodbye.